right, welcome everyone to Real Conspiracies, where I, your host, PJ Williams, dive into the occult symbolism and hidden messages in your favorite movies and video games. Today, I am talking about Back to the Future, and I'm joined by Brad Lail of the Awakened podcast. Brad, how's it going, man?
What's up, dude? Yeah, dude, Back to the Future, one of my favorite movies since I was literally a kid, you know?
Dude, me too. It was so great because I went on your show earlier this week, and this will come out in a week or two after this, but we were talking about Back to the Future a little bit, and I was like, well, let's just dive deeper into this. Let's do a whole episode on it. And it was great because I got to finally watch this movie with my kids, and I didn't realize that my kids hadn't seen it. But when I was like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old, like I probably watched the Back to the Future trilogy 100 times. It was one of my favorite movies as a kid.
Yeah, same here, man. And if you could see my office, I got like Back to the Future stuff scattered throughout. I got all kind of tchotchkes all over the wall, baseball cards, all kind of stuff, and little miniatures Back to the Future, like DeLorean. And I got the license plate, the out of time license plate.
That's awesome, dude. So yeah, I've actually got this shirt. It's not actually Back to the Future. It says "I will not eat the bugs," and it's in a Back to the Future. I thought it was perfect to wear it today. So
it is.
Yeah, I was like looking. I was like, "What am I going to wear for this podcast?" I saw that. I was like, "Oh, duh, I have to wear that." So, but yeah, let's talk about this movie. Let's get into it. There's so many theories here, and I know that I've got some stuff I want to bring up. You sent me some stuff to bring up. This is going to be great, dude. So for people who are not familiar, you've been living under a rock for your whole life. Back to the Future is a 1985 American science fiction film that was directed by Robert Zemeckis. And he directed things like Forrest Gump, Death Becomes Her, Castaway, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I bring those ones up in particular, especially Forrest Gump and Death Becomes Her, because those are ones I definitely want to cover on the show in the future. There's so much stuff there. I think you and me were talking the other day, but about Forrest Gump. And I think I told you that it has like all this Baphomet symbolism that people don't realize. So that's one I'm definitely want to get into. He's got so much occult things going on in those other films, so it makes sense that it would also show up in Back to the Future. But I also didn't recognize half of this stuff when I was a kid, and rewatching it this week, I was catching all these things that I just never thought of before.
Wasn't Goldie Hawn in Death Becomes Her?
Was it Goldie?
It's been a while since I watched. Was it
Goldie Hawn?
But I feel like it was. I got to look it up. But so she's actually had a lot of interactions with like UFOs her whole life, and seeing aliens and stuff. So that's another weird little, like it's like a little. And her husband, Russell. God, dude, whenever I get on these shows, man, I get brain farts.
You know what's funny is I'm so good with celebrity names and movie names and things like that. But as soon as I start, same. As soon as I start hit record, names go out the window. Because like I think it's Goldie Hawn, but now I'm like second guessing it.
Well, Kurt Russell was part of he was pretty famous. He reported like 2 major UFO incidences, which included the Phoenix Lights in Arizona. He was a pilot, and he flew. He was flying through Phoenix, and he actually saw those lights, so he called it in. So he's been involved with a number, and so his son. They've been the whole family's been involved with a number of like UFO incidences, which is another little weird occult tie-ins. So.
Oh yeah, that is weird. I was gonna say I haven't done an episode on Death Becomes Her yet, but I did talk about it a little bit on the I Come in Peace episode because it was written by David Koepp, who wrote another film that had to do with adrenochrome, which was I Come in Peace. So interesting stuff there. Those are all movies I want to get to. This movie was also written by Zemeckis and his friend Bob Gale. It stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Crispin Glover, and Thomas F. Williams. And the plot is summed up basically as this. Set in 1985, it follows Marty McFly, a teenager accidentally sent back to 1955 in a time-traveling DeLorean automobile built by his eccentric scientist friend Emmett Doc Brown, where he inadvertently prevents his future parents from falling in love, threatening his own existence, and is forced to reconcile them and somehow get back to the future. So I hope that everybody watching this has seen this movie. If you haven't, you really probably should just pause this podcast, go watch it. I feel sorry for your childhood if you didn't. I seriously love this movie. It was such a staple in my house growing up. So when it was a Saturday where we didn't want to do anything, we maybe would do a Star Wars marathon or a Back to the Future marathon. It was like one or the other when I was a kid. So.
When you watch these movies with like we were talking the other day, we have like a photography film type background, video background. And so when you watch these things with the fresh eyes that you have as an adult, it's like, oh my God, how come I didn't see this stuff? You know, so I've watched these movies 1,000 times at least. And I'm still picking up on stuff now.
You're so right, because when I went to school for film originally. That's what I went to college for. And so it went from being a movie fan my whole life to then all of a sudden seeing something else in movies I never saw before. I'd see all the camera movements, and I'd see the blocking, and I'd see the lighting, and I would see all kinds of stuff that I never saw before. And then I got really deep into conspiracy theories and occult symbolism and, understanding Freemasonic ideas and concepts and Gnostic ideas and concepts. And now there's like a whole nother layer of films. So not only did the movies I watched as a child, I started watching them again as a teenager, as a young adult, and seeing things I never saw before from a filmmaker aspect. But now I'm seeing it from like a writing, symbolic aspect. So yeah, there's so many things. Like I've watched some of these movies that I've talked about in here like 100 freaking times, and I'm still catching new stuff because my eyes are kind of being open to new things I just didn't see were there. So in this one, yeah, I watched it again, kind of understood more of the filmmaking aspect of it when I was like 20 years old. And now I'm watching it and going like, holy crap, there's so much in here that I never would have thought to see, for sure. My wife hates it because I ruin movies for her. So I have to be quiet. I have to be quiet when we watch movies, and I'll ask her, I'm like, do you want me to because she'll get mad. She'll get mad if I go too deeply into it. So this time I didn't say anything the whole time. We just watched it with the kids, enjoyed it. But this movie's really famous. It did really well. It was released July 3rd, 1985. It cost $19 million to make, and it made $381 million worldwide. So huge success, highest grossing film of 1985. Rotten Tomatoes gives this a 93%. The critic consensus says that it's inventive, funny, and breathlessly constructed. Back to the Future is a rousing time travel adventure with an unforgettable spirit. I usually bring up like more reviews, but I feel like it's pretty widely just loved. It's praised. I saw a couple of bad reviews. One of them, literally, it was definitely not written in 1985. This was a review written by some feminist blogger in 2024, because it was Back to the Future is marred by the idea that it glorifies the 1950s. There's, some feminist trash crap, like being all mad that it made the 1950s not look like crap or something. In the weirdest little thing I found about this is this movie so well received, so popular that in December of 2007, it was selected by the United States Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry for being, quote, culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. And I would say so. I mean, this is if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, you're very familiar with this film, I'd imagine. And it's got staying power. The only reason this movie hasn't been remade, thankfully, luckily, is because Robert Zemeckis and was his name Bob Gale? Bob Hope. Yeah. Bob Gale said that they will never let this movie be remade while either one of them are alive. They retain the rights to it in that way. So thank God, because I do not want to see a remake. The only remake of this that I will enjoy is Rick and Morty. That's the only remake of Back to the Future that we need, essentially. Which was funny because now that I'm a fan of Rick and Morty, I watched it and saw things in it that I didn't even think about before.
Well, it's the same thing. I started watching Rick and Morty a couple years ago, just as to like escape from like conspiracy and stuff, because I was into it too much, and it was I would watch
same
it.
For me, dude. That's like 2020. I started watching it. Yeah,
but we were just jumping right into it. Still, we're getting right back into the weird conspiracy stuff in Rick and Morty too. And we just weren't really paying attention to it.
There's so much there. Maybe one day I'll do an episode about Rick and Morty. Or a couple episodes. I don't know. It's hard to do TV shows. It's hard to do ones like I did Gravity Falls, but I did it from a certain angle because, like I said in the episode, like I could go through each episode of Gravity Falls and make a real conspiracies episode out of it, because each one is, a conspiracy concept, a cryptid, full of occult numerology and symbolism and stuff like that. Rick and Morty would probably be the same way.
Yeah.
So normally I go through these movies kind of beginning to end and look for the symbolism. This time I think it's different because there's so many big concepts, and some of these concepts, they don't just stay in the first movie. So even though I normally try to pick one movie and whatever, I feel like Back to the Future works, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think Back to the Future works this way. I think the first film has, the entire plot, right? And then each film is a play on that plot in a different way. So it's basically taking the first film and then setting it in the future, or then setting it further in the past, and they have the same beats, right? You've got the Biff character, you've got, Marty McFly waking up in some strange person's bed. You've got all of these things happening over again, but the reason I don't expect that I would do like an episode 2, a specific episode just on 2 or 3, is because I think all the conspiracy concepts that are important in 2 and 3 all link back to 1. So I guess what I was saying is, I think as much as I want to stick to the first movie, some of these concepts are going to span into 2 and span into 3. Is that kind of fair to say? Is that
sure, 100%.
Okay. So that's where I'm thinking about going with this. And obviously the most famous theory, I don't know if it's I would say it's the most famous theory. The most famous theory, conspiracy theory, because there's fan theories. There's always weird fan theories on the Back to the Future film is the 9/11 theory. And this was broken down in like this really popular 10-minute video that you can find on YouTube pretty easily. So I want to go through that theory, talk with you about it, because we talked about this off air, and maybe we talked about this on your podcast as well. I kind of have a different theory on why the 9/11 symbolism is so strong in this movie. That's not exactly predictive programming or even time travel. So that's kind of the reason I want to break it down. It was broken down so well in that video that I almost didn't want to do it for that reason. I was like, you could just watch this 10-minute video. The guy does it perfectly. But because I have a different take on it, I want to go through it. So, and stop me at any point if I'm messing into this up. But
yeah, I was just want to give a shout out to the guy who made it. His name is Barely Human, or his YouTube channel is called Barely Human. So if you want to check it out, it's a really good episode.
Yeah, I will link it.
Very well known at this point.
Yeah, I will link it in the description for this video as well. It is very good. It's like 10 minutes long. It's worth watching. I watched it like 5 times at this point. But going back to, I don't know when he released it, but I saw it years ago.
Yeah, I did too.
Okay.
I think I heard about it on Tinfoil Hat through
okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So where this one starts, and correct me at any point if I'm missing anything, is kind of towards the beginning of the movie. We get this scene where Marty's with his girlfriend and they're talking about their camping trip, and this lady rudely interrupts them and is talking about wanting to save the clock tower. And where the theory kind of starts is that you see this flyer that she hands them for the clock tower, and in it you see 2 words that are going to be important in this theory, and that is tower struck, right? So they comes up right here, tower struck, and this is like kind of the first link to the 9/11 towers being struck right here. It's not a lot yet, but it makes more sense as it goes along. And what makes this even weirder is that above her head, as she's asking for the donation, is quite literally our first, occult symbolism. It says the third eye, and it's got the all-seeing eye pyramid right here above her head, right here on the door. In fact, and I want to bring up more about this town later with a different theory that I want to talk about, but there's so much weirdness in this freaking film set for Hills. Is it Hillsdale? I always get it wrong.
Hill Valley.
I always want to say Hillsdale, and I know it's wrong. In Hill Valley, this set it's not even a real town. It's just a set that they use in California for different things. But every store is something kind of weird.
Yeah, it was also, this film set has been used a lot. It was used in like Gremlins on for Kingston Falls on Gremlins, and a bunch of different very well-known movies. But yeah, if you keep pausing it throughout that, you can see a lot of like hidden messages in the background of this town square. And they actually change. The storefronts change a lot very often, not just from the past to the future, but like in this scene, you'll as they go around, you'll see like the storefronts even change. There's a lot of product placement, obviously, but
yeah, the California Raisins
like,
one is like a famous product placement thing that they talk about in a lot of the like DVD commentaries and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that product placement, or that subconscious, just that right there that you're showing, it programs into your subconscious mind, and you don't even really realize it. It's just because it's sigil magic. It's the image that flashes on your screen, and just because what is it? How many frames per second? And they're just flashing as many frames per second as they can and getting all these things. And if you don't think that some of this stuff matters, man, you got to really look at the whole movie. There's so many details that are done on this movie, even from the pin that Marty wears in the opening scene. It's a pin called Art in Revolution. And that's something that you have to really pay attention to. It's so the detail. So to say that somebody's not curating or crafting every single message is an understatement. I mean, it would be falsehood to say, because there's a lot of that kind of hidden programmatic, symbolism that's hidden throughout.
Oh yeah, there's so much subliminal stuff in this, and I want to talk about that later with like the sex magic angle, because there's a sex magic angle to this. Like, I've heard a lot of articles call this, and this is normie articles, this isn't like conspiracy theory articles, saying that this is maybe one of the most Freudian movies ever made. It's very strong there, and we're going to come back to that. But in this theory, you've got this woman handing out the flyer for the clock tower. It's about a tower being struck. She's got the all-seeing eye above her head, and then when Marty goes in the middle of the night to meet Doc Brown at the mall, there's two very interesting things that happen here. First of all, it's called the Twin Pines Mall. And second of all, he shows up at exactly 1:16 a.m. And 1:16 upside down would be 9/11. So you've got 9/11 next to Twin Pines, right? And again, I know that some people are going to say this is a stretch, but you got to like follow this through, because it becomes like really weird after a while. But what were you going to say?
Look at I'm sorry to interrupt you, dude, but look at the trees right there. They even have smoke trails coming from the top of them. Like, that's not even a normal thing to see. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, it's super weird. So he shows up 1:16 a.m., 9/11 upside down, and then we get another 9/11 right after that, except this time it's just 9/11 backwards. The stopwatches both say 1:19. So we've got 9/11 again backwards this time. So we got upside down the first time, backwards the second time, and then he comes back. This isn't 9/11 symbolism exactly, but when he comes back, it's 1:33 a.m., which I find interesting because you've got 33, and then it's Lone Pine Mall. And this happens because of a small scene in the movie where Marty is driving through the tree farm. Where the mall sits used to be a big tree farm, and this guy was trying to breed two trees as the plot for some reason. And he runs over one of the trees. Instead of twin pines, it becomes the lone pine. Just like with the World Trade Centers, two towers, they get taken down, they get resurrected again as the one World Trade Center. This whole 33 in the Lone Pine Mall makes so much sense to me. I'm trying to save that part, the ritual magic part, for the end, because I think the theory I want to get through first, and then I want to talk about my take on it. So that's the next symbolism. You see the 33, the Lone Pine, 2 becomes 1. So the other thing about this, the other 9/11 symbolism that shows up in this, is that when Marty finally does manage to hit the lightning bolt, through that line, hits the DeLorean at 88 miles per hour, and he goes from 1955 back to the future to 1985. He leaves this giant burning 911 on the street. And it's so weird because, again, like this whole, Western Auto makes the 9 on the left side. You've got the tire tracks make the 11. It's kind of the third 911 in this. I know some people say it's a stretch. What are your thoughts on this one, though?
No, I agree, and like I said again, if you're driving around the town and you look at the symbolism, there's a scene, when Marty's famously on a skateboard in the first 10 minutes of the movie, 20 minutes of the movie, mm-hmm. he's hitching onto the Jeep and the truck and everything, and he's riding around the town. There's a moment where he passes the theater and there's a giant cross and it says Jesus saves on it. So there's a lot of even messages there that. For me, look at the aspect of like, maybe there are other angles that maybe they are trying to tell us something about the future, right? I mean, there's the occult aspect of it, but maybe there's, and I kind of mentioned this on my show the other day, is like, maybe there's like they're trying to tell us something, right? Rather than, and I know that's not the occult magic or, that angle of it, but it is the, There is a lot of like references to Jesus, and there's a lot of references to, there's a very religious undertone to it, is what I'm trying to say. Like there's references to aliens constantly throughout this movie through science fiction, comic books, and like the Tales from Space, whenever Marty lands into the barn. Like there's all these like his dad is going to be a science fiction writer, right?
Yeah, I heard someone actually try to make the comparison between his dad and L. Ron Hubbard. That there's there's something there. Yeah.
So there's like religious undertones too, and so you can see that throughout the movie. It's almost like they're trying to tell you like there's something very important about religion, and I guess that could be considered like. Occult knowledge or esoteric knowledge.
Well, I would say so, just because I feel like, and I want to come back to this, I want to get through the 9/11 thing, but like there's a lot of Gnostic undertones, whatever you call them. There's a lot of Gnostic messaging happening in the background of this film. So when you bring up the religious symbolism, I'm seeing it too. I tend to think that it's not pro-Christian as much as like a pro-Gnostic concept of Jesus or a Gnostic concept of the world. Sure. And I do have that in my notes. There's a whole like Prometheus Zeus angle that I want to talk about. But going outside of the first movie for a minute, for the first time in this episode, there's this really weird scene in Back to the Future 2. This is the second time that we see the Twin Pines, right? Our second time. We see the Twin Pines throughout the first film, but then we see it again in the second film, and it happens in this weird scene with they're at the McFly's house, and they've got the scenery channel on, and it's just beautiful scenery. And then we see these two, I don't know if they're pines, but they're two big trees kind of making two pillars on either side of this screen. And then weirdly enough, the two pines actually morph into the Twin Towers. It actually becomes the Twin Towers for a quick second on the screen. And what the guy points out in his video is that in this scene, you've got George McFly hanging upside down because he hurt his back, and he's looking at this screen. And if you look at it, it's doing that kind of like thing where which makes no sense because the future's all digital, but it's like film is cycling, right? Yeah. And it looks like from his angle, the tower's going vertically straight down, right? So you've got this like, again, this is kind of the stretch part of it, but I find that very interesting. Where it gets really weird though, where like the theory, in my opinion, becomes very convincing, is that when Marty does go back to the future, he goes to when Marty goes to the future, he goes to October of 2015. And Robert Zemeckis directed this film. He also directed a film that came out in October of 2015 called The Walk. And in this movie, a man has to walk on a tightrope between two towers. He can't do this legally, so he has to rig up a giant wire between the towers, just like Doc Brown is doing in the first movie, rigging this giant thing. There's a scene in the first movie where he literally pays off a cop that I totally forgot was in there. The cop's like, do you have a permit for that? He's like, sure he does. He's like, what's $75? I totally forgot that was in there. But you've got this kind of illegal rigging of a wire to a tower, right? The tower that gets struck in both cases. And then as soon as this whole thing works, as soon as he rigs the wire to the tower in Back to the Future, sends Marty to the future, instantly the other Marty comes back from the future, right? And he's wearing the exact same clothes that the character in The Walk is wearing. And he's got this whole thing. Again, you've got 1985 is when this movie is, 2015 is when The Walk is. 30 years gap, and Marty writes Doc a letter about the future, and when he hands it to Doc, he says, what's the meaning of this? He says, you'll find out in 30 years. So the theory is that this movie is saying that question to the audience. What's the meaning of the clock tower? What's the meaning of the 9/11 symbolism? You'll find out in 30 years. And in 30 years, Robert Zemeckis makes his next film about the Twin Towers. Am I doing it justice, the theory? Like, what's your thoughts on this theory? Because
no, I think you are. I mean, that's what the that's what the theory is, right? Well, that's what the Barely Humans theory is, which is interesting because I mean, you really have to kind of you have to be into movies to even know that movie even existed. I didn't even know that movie existed until I've never
heard of The Walk ever in my life, except in this theory. And I like Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He's the main character, and Robert Zemeckis is a pretty big time director, but I literally never heard of that movie.
Yeah, I haven't either. But again, there's all these. You mentioned the pines, and I was trying to figure out like what could be the tie-in there, because there is a weird obsession with pine trees. It's like Old Man Peabody, for example, is like, you know, when Doc is about to go into. I mean, when Doc is about to get the time machine, he's in the Twin Pines Mall parking lot, and he's telling Marty there used to be land for as far as the eye could see here, or something like that, a long time ago. Right. And he was talking about Old Man Peabody wanting to breed pine trees for some reason, right? And then when you get into the past, you know, Old Man Peabody is just talking about the pine trees again. And to me, it seems like there's a cult, you know, this undertone of like maybe there's a pineal gland tie.
Yeah, that's what I've heard a few people say is the pine cone, the pineal gland. The pine cone also is the symbol of Dionysus. So you've got some maybe tie-ins there, but and I've made this connection before that the Dionysus pine cone might also be a reference to the pineal gland, but yeah, man, just again, all the symbolism that's buried in this stuff, it's like you have to really understand that like you got to think about it from the marketing perspective, which is what I take on it, is like if there's somebody who is
product placement person. I mean, if you look in this movie, it is product placement everywhere. You can't even, that's the kind of stuff I see. And that's probably the kind of stuff you see as well when you start watching these kind of movies. It's like you start seeing Mountain Dew, and Doc Brown's shed or office was like right next to a Burger King, that kind of stuff. Like Toys R Us was in the background, all this stuff. So if they're paying
Nike
attention,
shoes is shown like often and talked about quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, Mattel, right? Mattel hoverboard, that kind of stuff. So there's somebody who's clearly paying attention to the background. That's the whole point of what I was trying to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people don't understand, like, with film, nothing happens on accident, especially when you're talking about a film that's not just like, hey, we went to a place and filmed what was there. This is a set. This is a completely made up set, right? They decide what's on every single building. They decide what food is on, like, what every item of food is on every table, what every costume, t-shirt, everything. It's extremely meticulous, and I think a lot of people miss that, and they just assume that there's a mistake or it's a coincidence. But nothing is a coincidence. I mean, in this movie, like I can't think of his name right now, Christopher Lloyd is so much taller than Michael J. Fox that they're being very intentional about where they stand in every scene. This is called blocking, which is where they make people stand, because they didn't want Michael J. Fox to appear short, which he is. So they're like, hey, can you hunch over? Can we put these taller shoes on him? Can we have you stand a little bit further from the camera and have him stand a little closer? Like, everything is so meticulous for every shot. If you've ever been on a film set, I have, it takes, I mean, to get like 15 seconds of film is like a whole day's worth of work sometimes. It's insane what happens to this stuff. And then you've got, months of pre-production and whatever. So all of this stuff is very intentional. I was bringing up the Raisinets earlier because that was one of the product placements that they failed at getting in the movie super well. It ends up showing up on a bench. But they wanted to show Raisinets in it and make it work the same way that Reese's Pieces worked for E.T. In E.T., it sold Reese's Pieces. It made them a staple. But with Raisinets, they're like, look, we can't film raisins on a table because it looks like a bowl of dirt. So they couldn't find a way to make raisins look good. And they were trying so hard to get a scene with raisins in it. They ended up just putting the Raisinets logo on a bench at some point. So it's all very intentional.
And you mentioned the height difference too, and you can see that a lot of times when someone shoots at an angle. For example, if they want to make someone look taller, like they want to make Biff look taller, they shot down and behind, shooting up towards over Marty's shoulder. So they made Biff look very tall, and they also shot down over Biff's shoulder, making Marty look very small. And there was another thing. The reason why Claudia Wells, who I think that was her name, Claudia Wells, who was the first Jennifer, was recast. Well, she had a family emergency. She got out of acting, and then she was recast a second time. But I can't remember the lady's name, but she was.
I think it was Elizabeth Shue in the second movie.
No. Well, Elizabeth Shue was the third one. There was a second one that was recast.
Yeah, you're right. I keep forgetting.
Yeah. So Eric Stoltz was actually cast for the original.
They filmed a lot of it with Eric Stoltz before they realized that he sucked, and then they had to get. I think they paid like $4 million more to get Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, and I mean, that was a good move, obviously.
For sure. I don't think this movie becomes a staple with Eric Stoltz.
No, his little squirms and the way he moves his body and stuff, and it's heavy, Doc, and that kind of stuff. It's like too perfect,
No, yeah, for sure. I love it. So the thing I want, so with the whole 9/11 theory, right? Obviously, what we're seeing is, you see the 9/11 at the mall, you see the 9/11 upside down, you see it backwards, you see it on the street, you see the two become one, you see the twin pines become the lone pine, you see the tower struck being a big thing, the wire, all of that stuff. And the question then becomes in people's minds, like, okay, someone might think, is Robert Zemeckis a time traveler? Does he have knowledge of the future? Is there some type of occult knowledge, like Looking Glass thing going on? The other idea would be predictive programming. Were they planning 9/11 for so long that they were showing us exactly how it happened? The whole world's a stage and it's a script and things like that. And where I come down on this is actually a little bit differently, because I think everybody always talks about predictive programming, revelation of the method, things like that. But I did an episode in the past about 9/11 being a massive public ritual. And there were people who predicted with alarming accuracy what was going to happen on 9/11 because of the occult ritual aspect of 9/11. They actually just looked at all of the occult symbolism, the occult, rituals, and said, hey, this would be a mass public ritual if two towers were taken down, they became one, and they were done on 9/11 for these reasons. So I want to go through that because the theory by Barely Human is interesting, but I think differently than predictive programming because I think that this is a mass public ritual. And what we see is that there's this idea in Freemasonry and others and other occult practices of the pillars of Boaz and Yakin, right? So you've got these two pillars on the left and right. With every Freemasonic ritual, you walk between these two pillars. You've got the pillar of severity on the left and the pillar of mercy on the right. You've got the left hand and right hand path. And the ritual of two becoming one, the reconciling of opposites, creates the pillar of consciousness. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. Sometimes it's the ultimate masculine, the ultimate feminine, and they become one, right? You've got this transgender idea, being that is both, this Baphomet. Literally, Baphomet is the ultimate male and female is the concept there, right? And some, you can also link it back to the Kabbalah tree of life and the center chakra and all these things that you've got a left hand and right hand path. And when they merge and become one, you get that top head chakra and all this stuff. And in fact, I'm not just making all these weird links. I wanted to read a little bit from this Freemasonic website. It's the Grand Lodge of Rhode Island, where they literally just say, yes, all of these things are the same thing. They're all the same ritual, and we do this ritual. So just to show you that really quick, again, this is RhodeIslandMasons.org. It says the twin pillars are shown at the Kabbalistic Temple of Solomon. In the Kabbalah, these pillars explain all the mysteries of antagonism, whether natural, political, or religious. They elucidate the pre-creative struggle between man and woman. According to the laws of nature, the woman must resist the man, and he must entice or overcome her. That's also happening in this movie, by the way. We can talk about that in a minute. Such is the significance of the two pillars. They're distinct and separate. Contrary in appearance, separately, their power is one joined, and they would destroy one another. And for precisely the same reason, the spiritual power is weakened and would attempt to usurp the temporal, and the temporal becomes victim if it encroaches on the spiritual. Human equilibrium requires 2 feet. The world, gravity, forces, yada, 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 between the two sexes. It says when the pillars find equilibrium, it is said to generate a third pillar, one in the middle, which esoterically represents man or mankind. It goes on to say in Kabbalistic teaching, the pillars represent the Sephiroth, the tree of life, and symbolize mercy and severity. So it's making all the connections I was just making. I'm trying to gloss over it because it's kind of long and full of extra language and stuff like that. But again, it's saying the same things. You've got the Sephiroth, this tree of life, and I want to bring up this because this is what I think explains the 9/11 symbolism. It's not just that it is a date in the future that this was going to happen on, but the reason it happened on that date is because it was a public ritual and the numbers line up. So with 9/11, what you have is this idea of the Sephiroth, the tree of life, right? We talked about the left-hand, right-hand path, and on the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life, you've got all these things. They also line up with chakras, right? Like the same concept, right? And if you take the left or the right-hand path, you can get to this center chakra. It's kind of upside down, but the bottom is what we're talking about in this case, right? Normally, the tree of life has 10, or normally the Sephiroth has 10 pathways. And these pathways are seen as mirrors of self-development, right? So where you're at in life, you can go along the left-hand path of severity, the right-hand path of mercy. You can cut through the middle and have this like equilibrium idea. But normally you would get to the 10, and the 10 is down here at the bottom. So you can see the numbers. This is the tree of life numbered. But in some secret Kabbalistic teachings, it actually is 11, like in this one. So the idea of skipping over the 10 to the 11, going from the 9 to the 11, is the ultimate gnosis, the ultimate, enlightenment. So it's this ultimate enlightenment ritual to jump from the 9 to the 11. So when you're talking about the 2 becoming 1 and the 9 to the 11, it is part of the same ritual. So the reason I bring all that up, and I know I'm kind of glossing over and making it as short and simple and sweet as I can for people who are not familiar with this stuff, is that people have looked at this symbolism and looked at the ritualistic magic that's being done by Hollywood, by the elites, and things like that. And they've been able to use their concepts to understand what they're doing. And that, again, people predicted 9/11 based on everything I just said, down to the day it would happen and to which towers it would happen to, all back in the late 90s. So when I see this concept of the 9/11 symbolism, the two towers becoming one, it's to me, it's not even time travel, which would be the coolest possible story, right? Considering it's a movie about time travel. Like if Robert Zemeckis is writing a movie to kind of say, hey, you know, I've seen into the future and this is what's going to happen, and I'll reveal that in 2015, and that's why all of it's there. Like I love that theory and that concept, and it's so cool. But I just look at this as it's the same ritual that happened on 9/11 that is happening in this movie, that is happening in tons of other movies, and I've pointed out a ton of these in other movies in the past, that this these two towers, this Boaz and Yakin, the two becoming one, it's just repeated throughout so many movies. So when I see it so explicitly in this one, I just assume it's the same ritual and that it's not really predicting 9/11. But what's your thoughts on that?
Well, the tree of life kind of looks like a human body, like the spine, right, of a human body, right? And there's 33 vertebrae in the human body, right? Mm-hmm. So again, there's always this ritualistic 33 number, and we talked about it the other day, how it's almost like this. There's always this nod to like the fallen angels, right? The 33% of fallen angels that fell on the 33rd parallel at Mount Hermon, and you can see a lot of this stuff actually with like for 9/11, for example. Muhammad Atta was 33 years old. There was like 33 crew members in total that died in all of the plane crashes. Right. Yeah. Flight 93 had 33 passengers. I mean, so and what happened? Like we're military. What came about after the military? You got the post 9/11 GI Bill, which was chapter 33. So
exactly.
It's like, there's all these these occult ritualistic numbers and things that kind of like, it's like a brew of some sort that they're trying to concoct.
That's why I bring up this scene here again, the Lone Pine Mall, when they've completed the ritual, right? When the two has become one, Marty literally drives between two pillars as he's going back to the future, right? So he goes between the pillars of Boaz and Yakin, and the two become one. He went to the past to change that. He comes back to the Lone Pine Mall and he's reached that 33rd degree. Like it's all there. So
of course,
100%, dude. Like that's why these numbers are not on accident.
No, it never is, man. And like we mentioned, we didn't even talk about the Libyan terrorists, right?
Oh, thank you. I totally forgot that part of the theory.
It was a big part, which was the Libyan terrorists.
My bad. I should have said that, but yes, you're right. The whole thing is happening because Libyan terrorists are at the Twin Pines Mall. Thank you. Yeah.
So first of all, Muslim terrorists taking down the towers, right? That's the story of 9/11, but that's also the story of Back to the Future. Muslim terrorists going after, not really exactly the same, but coming in, and then you got the tie-in with the 116. And by the way, 116 was, I think, the full length of the first movie. 1 hour and 16.
Oh yeah,
something along those lines. I
think you're right, though. I think you're right. Yeah.
But there's it was
just shy of 2 hours is what I remembered. So,
well, with Hillary Clinton, what happened? She sold uranium, right, to the Russians. Well, plutonium is what's used in the time machine, right, to power the time machine. Plutonium was named after the planet Pluto, and there's nods to the planet Pluto in on the cover of the Tales from Space comic book, when old man, when he goes back in time, like there's a reference from that's where the Martian came from, was planet Pluto. So there was at one point where they wanted to rename the movie from Back to the Future to Man from Pluto. The Man from Pluto. Really? I didn't know that. It was I was reading about it on IMDb trivia last night, and Steven Spielberg hated it, but like the idea the idea was put out there that they should change that line where he's like, I'm Darth Vader from planet Vulcan, to I'm an alien from Pluto, and to change the name to the Man from Pluto or whatever, because they thought that Back to the Future would be a terrible name for a movie, and that going off this angle in the trailer where it looked like instead of time travel, it was like Marty McFly was from another planet, like kind of trick people in the trailer thinking it was about aliens and stuff like that to get them to go see the movie. But yeah, it's all there. Like the whole Pluto idea. I didn't even think about that with the plutonium. Well, with the plutonium, so plutonium is made in a nuclear reactor. It's the byproduct of uranium. Okay, so like there's again another tie-in to the future, if you will. And what was when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, what happened? Benghazi happened, which happened on 9/11 as well.
Yep, it did.
Right. And then there's also she was selling uranium to the Russians, or whatever the case is. I can't remember exactly what it was. It's been a while now, but again, it's just all these like little weird things, man, that like and it's also weird that like, again, she started a company called Hidden Light, right? Which is a weird name for a production company. Her and her daughter started together. Why is all these people, when they get out of politics, why do they become production? And
the Obamas, what was theirs called? It was like
Higher Ground.
Higher Ground, thank you. And the symbolism is the staircase, the Freemasonic staircase.
And it looks like a pyramid too. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it looks like a pyramid too. So like, why are these people? Susan Rice is the Netflix chair, or on the board of the Netflix directors, the board of directors for Netflix. Excuse me, I said that wrong. But so yeah, man, there's always these interesting tie-ins. And again, Hillary Clinton with the Libya thing. It's like, you're right. That's actually interesting though, because these are Libyan terrorists, right? Yes.
And 9/11, Libya, the whole Benghazi thing. Yeah.
Benghazi, Libya. Exactly. Yeah. And then when they killed Gaddafi, what did she had a famous line. I can't remember how it went. It was just like, we came, we saw, we killed him, or something like that.
It was something like that. So then her awful cackle at the end.
Yeah. So there's a weird another little offshoot tie-in to it that's 9/11 related, which is a different 9/11.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. And I was also thinking too, like there's this whole misdirection in the beginning too, about like, where the plutonium came from and who stole it and all this stuff. And that makes me think of, the yellow cake uranium that supposedly came from Africa that was being sent to Saddam Hussein to create weapons of mass destruction and all that stuff. So not as strong of a tie as the other one, but it definitely came to my mind. It was like, there's this plutonium theft in the beginning and they're trying to make a dirty bomb with it. And it's terrorists from somewhere in the Middle East. In this case, Libya, which is Africa. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. You were talking about Susan Rice and Hillary Clinton, the Obamas and stuff like that. And I think that the reason that all this happens, and the reason why this movie and all these movies have all these little, tidbits in there, and it's just like a constant drip of whatever, is that they're trying to condition the minds of the masses to kind of accept and understand their occult doctrines. So this stuff is extremely important. It's so important that millionaire politicians who don't need to be involved in this stuff are then getting involved and trying to condition you to their occult symbolism, to condition you to accept their doctrine and to accept their religion or whatever.
Yeah, and they put stuff in the movies to kind of laugh at us too. I feel like it's like, haha, we're just doing this in plain sight now. And so once people start to kind of wake up and see that stuff, it's kind of hard to unsee. You know, like for me, I look at things from like, again, I talk a lot about the 33rd parallel. So I look at things from like an energy grid perspective. You know what I mean? And I have this whole theory about the Earth. There used to be this. It's not just my theory. There's a guy named Bruce Cathy who wrote a book called Harmonic 33. And he talked about this Earth energy grid. I have a book behind me too, is Harmonic 695, the pulse of the universe. So I look at things like that, and if you think about the flux capacitor, what is a capacitor? It stores. It's the most important. It has the most important in a electrical circuit. It stores energy. It stores electrical energy. And it smooths out electrical signals, and it prevents like information loss. So they're like little tanks of energy. I'm gonna think of them like a water tank of energy, and they just evenly disperse energy. Well, again, I look at it from the perspective of, I talk a lot about have this theory about plasma, which ties into the movie as well. I mean, when you're watching it, it's like everything they talk about is very, again, occult knowledge that I feel like I've been coming across this stuff, and I'm like, how have we not been talking about this? Because plasma is like the fourth state of matter. So you got a solid, liquid, and gas, but nobody ever talks about plasma. Well, a solid becomes a liquid when it's heated. A liquid becomes a gas when it's heated. A gas becomes dispersed ions, which is plasma whenever it's heated. And there's this theory that these things, when UFOs and different things come from, other planets or interdimensional or ultra terrestrial, whatever you want to say, they're vibrating into our reality. And there's FBI documents that can back this kind of stuff up, that they talk about this, that they, in order to come into our dense matter, they almost dematerialize. And Doc Brown, actually, this happens. Like you can, like flux, for example, means to flow in and out of metal, like to melt metal and to like reform, basically. Like it can flux, it can, so there's like these little things about the movie it seems very specific. Like we laugh and we go, oh, flux capacitor or gigawatts.
Yeah, 1.21 gigawatts. Yeah, like it's a thing to laugh about. Stuff. Right.
That gigawatts is real stuff. That's real energy stuff that I'm talking about. Again, if you tie in the energy grid, if you tie in the, okay, so think about what lightning is. Lightning is plasma. It's just ions that shoot together, that form together, and they're trying to form something, because ions are always floating around us. And when these cryptids come into reality, or when these UFOs or whatever come into our reality, they're basically using the ions from putrefied remains of dead animals and stuff. That's why they stink. That's why they look like crazy different, mixtures and
like chimeras and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So when they come in, they're just using the ions available, and they're reforming into something. And that's why we can never pinpoint exactly what a dog man looks like or all these other things. I know I kind of took it on a different path.
No, I love this, dude. I wasn't thinking any of this stuff at all, so I'm so fascinated. But it's so funny because it doesn't matter who you listen to, whether it's aliens or cryptids or demons or things like that. They're all, the thing that is true about all of these things is that every story involves that they're both corporeal and incorporeal. And when you talk about it from the idea of plasma and the ether and coming in and out of this reality in that way, I think it's fair. I haven't heard that before, so I'll have to check out that book you're talking about.
Well, the plasma thing is my idea. Actually, believe it or not,
I love it, dude.
The energy grid is the work of a guy named Bruce Cathy. He's a New Zealand pilot that for 50 years he studied the energy grid.
I've heard of him. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know this guy.
Amazing guy. I mean, he's done a lot of work, man. So it's not fair for me to take the energy grid stuff, but he has theories about us blowing up the energy grid or cataclysms blowing up the energy grid. But my theory is that we're blowing the energy grid up ourselves with like nuclear bombs and things like that. So because all the nuclear bombs have been dropped on the 33rd parallel, White Sands, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, all that stuff. So it's another interesting aspect of it. But I take things from a plasma portal angle. Like there's plasma available. When they come in, they're coming in from this etheric world, this conscious world, whatever it is, outside of our perception. We are in God's light, right? We are light beings. We're in the visible spectrum. We are in the perfect light of God. Right. And nothing can get to us because we're in this perfect vibration, this perfect, harmonious zone. And so there's these things outside of us that they want to get in here bad, but they can't, because this is God's world. This is God, that's where the theory, and this theory comes from Paul Stobbs, the theory of when God gave the promise of the rainbow, he made us into the rainbow and essentially put us in this like perfect light. And everything else is trying to get to us. So God shielded us from all these Nephilim and all these other things. So again, I didn't rabbit hole.
I love it, dude. And I also love Paul Stobbs. I think he is the next person I'm gonna have on the show. Actually, we're supposed to record in a couple of days, I think. So
great dude. Yeah. He's so smart. He could out-talk me and talk all day about this kind of stuff. But yeah, man, plasma portals again. And if you look at from that angle, what they're doing. And I think Doc even says at one time to Einstein, who by the way is the first time traveler, is Einstein. So maybe Einstein proved time travel.
Yeah, maybe he did.
Traveled himself for real, and we just don't know. But maybe that's another hidden aspect. But I can't remember exactly what he said, man. But basically the molecular structure of Einstein and the car, they go into this, and I think that's what he said was like, he said, "Don't worry about it, Marty. The molecular structure of Einstein and the car is going to come back completely intact." And that's exactly what I'm talking about with the plasma portal stuff. You're materializing and dematerializing.
Right.
But you need heavy amounts of electricity to do this. And again, when plasma is heated, that's the idea, is to heat plasma to form something. Because again, that's the perfect cycle of the 4 states of matter. To heat something again that's plasma, it turns it into a solid. So it goes back all the way around to the beginning.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, man.
So when they're using lightning, they're using energy, they're using plasma lightning to go into the future, go into the past.
I have two things I want to branch off of that from, because that's interesting. You said that the flux capacitor is storing this energy, kind of like this creation idea, and that is something that a lot of people have pointed out. And I don't know. There's definitely like subliminal sex stuff in this. So like I got to at least bring this theory up that the idea of basically there's a lot of sex magic stuff in that. And that if you understand like Crowleyan sex magic ideas, it's that sex is a powerful tool, and that the more deviant the act that you commit, this is Crowleyan stuff, the more powerful the magic, right? So like the first thing that everybody points out is kind of Freudian, is that the flux capacitor looks like the female reproductive system. So when you say that it's like this power, harnessing this power of creation, like that definitely fits into that concept. But as far as the Crowleyan idea goes, with like, how do we have a movie that's pushing like really deviant, weird sex stuff? I mean, the obvious thing is that this movie, this family movie, has this like major plot point of incest that is just super there. That is like, it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of like creepier the more I think about it. And like rewatching, I was like, yeah, that is like really, really weird, because this whole concept of Marty sleeping with his mom is like brought up over and over and over again. His mom is like super attracted to him. And one of the things that stuck out to me this time watching it is his idea to get his dad and mom to fall in love is that he's going to like make out with and molest his mother to basically perform this ritual that will get him back to the future. It's this like sex magic energy. And I'm just like, he couldn't have come up with any other plot, any other way to like, set his dad up to be the hero, like get him to stand up to Biff or whatever, than to literally molest his mom. And he's sitting in the car going like, you ever think like, you got to do something, but you don't want to do it. And he's like, it's like this whole like Aleister Crowley thing. Like if you read a lot about Aleister Crowley, which I don't suggest to anybody, but you'll realize that when his rituals failed, it's because he couldn't perform like more and more devious sex acts every day. Like he just couldn't rise to the task, so to speak, because it was so degrading and so disgusting, right? So like that's kind of here in this Hill Valley. We were talking about the subliminal messaging in the opening of this movie. Hill Valley in 1985, not in the weird Biff future, but the first time you see it, you've got Marty and his girlfriend making out on a bench next to the all-seeing eye, next to an adult film store. The theater is a XXX theater with a porn movie playing on it. And actually, here's a weird fact. The porn movie playing on the movie theater stars the guy who plays the bum. Red the Bum is an actual porn star from real life. No way. And the movie on the screen there is like his porno movie. So I just find that whole thing weird. You got like all this weird subliminal sex stuff going on there. And then, I don't know how much you believe in like actual subliminal stuff. Like I'm trying to think of the name of that book. I talked about it on our Shining episode. But it basically the idea that you could even put like bubbles in ice or whatever, and if you did it in the right way, it would like entice people. And you've got this little subliminal thing, like the first time people make a lot of big deal about this guitar, saying like, well, he's got a little guitar at the end, and then he's got a bigger guitar later on, it's like phallic or whatever. But right here you've got like sex written out in like big bold letters as he crashes. So there's a lot of stuff like that. I kind of shortened it from like, there's whole articles on this people can read if they want to. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that there's like subliminal sex stuff in this on purpose, that the ideas I mean pretty clearly so. That just pointing that out right there, that's the only letter, that's the only word you can see in the entire
pile of papers. Entire shot. I mean that's everything else is white or blurred or grayed or blurry. You mentioned his mom, so when he first notices his mom, he goes, "You're so hot." Like he's gonna say she's so hot.
That was what? So weird.
Yeah.
Like I've seen a picture of my mom when she was in her 20s. I never thought, oh yeah, my mom was hot back. Like it's a weird thing to think.
Yeah. That again, man, you're right. That, that's something that I didn't pick up on either was, I mean, I did pick up on the fact that it's creepy, but they did a lot of weird stuff in the 80s and 90s in movies. You'll see there's a lot of movies like what's the movie with the woman with the short black hair and it was a rich kid and he like makes out with her at the end. It was a kid. He was like 8 years old or something. And he was making, I can't remember.
I don't know what you're talking about, but it reminds me of, was it Demi Moore at one point in public was making out with like a 12-year-old because she thought it was edgy or something like that.
I don't remember that, man, but that was a popular thing to do, was like for kids to kiss adults in these movies.
Yeah.
And so, well, it's not a surprise.
In the second movie, he's like staring at his mom's fake jugs, and he's not like, "Oh, cover up, mom." He's like, he's like infatuated with it. It's really weird. It's really weird, but it does ring of like Freudianism and Crowley sex magic and things like that. Like Marty, as much as you think he's like appalled or repelled by the idea, he keeps coming up with ways to impress his mom. He keeps coming up with ways like, well, maybe I can, whatever, if I make out with her. And it's like, it's just weird. It's just weird. I don't see anybody actually acting like that with their mom, in real life. Strange stuff, man.
But yeah, of course, there's and you can even look at the pines as like a phallic symbol too, if you wanted to take that angle on it. I mean, but yeah, there's so many different ways. I talked about, the other day with you, there's like even an old world, Tartaria aspect of it that we, the flat earth aspect where there's more land aspect of it and stuff like that. So like, it just feels like there's
even a hollow earth. There's even hollow earth references in it too.
Is there really? I didn't even notice that. So yeah, man, there was something I was going to tell you about the,
Go ahead.
I
want to talk about the lightning thing really quick, because I want to get into that, the old Earth stuff. But you brought up the lightnings that charges the flux capacitor, and I don't want to gloss over that before I forget. So there's this theory that there's a story being told about the fallen angels, right? But it's coded in Greek language. So the idea is that Marty McFly is Prometheus, that he enlightens the kids from the past. He goes back and teaches them skateboarding, and he gives them rock and roll, right? Like he literally invents rock and roll in this movie.
Right, yeah.
And the way he invents rock and roll is he's playing with this band called Marvin Berry and the Starlighters, right? So you've got this kind of star, fallen angel, fallen star concept, and the song they play is Earth Angel. Like, again, Earth Angel, this fallen angel concept, right? And so if Marty McFly represents Prometheus, that Doc Brown in this movie would represent Zeus, because he uses lightning to defeat time. He uses lightning to defeat Kronos, the father of time, which is how Zeus defeats Kronos, right? And Kronos is the father of time, limitation, and death, right? And after he defeats the clock tower with lightning, you see an Olympic torch. The Olympic torch is a ceremony. The Olympic ceremony, the lighting of the torch, is literally to commemorate when the Greek gods defeat the Titans. So when Zeus defeated Kronos, they lit the torch. So you've got the torch scene in Back to the Future after he defeats Kronos, and that lightning. The use of lightning, if you look at Zeus, Balaam, Baal, like all of these references, look at I can't think of his name. The Anton LaVey Satanism uses the lightning bolt. Like the lightning bolt has so often been associated with Lucifer, the light bringer, Satan, things like that. So you've got this idea of Prometheus and Zeus. It's kind of this Gnostic concept. I also saw people point out that Marty McFly lives in lion estates and that he's trying to escape constantly. He's trying to move somewhere better, and that the lion is like representation of the demiurge, and that he has to escape. There's references to Jules Verne's, Journey to the Center of the Earth. So this prison planet thing is kind of there a little bit. And if you think about it in that way, from a Gnostic concept, if Marty is the Prometheus character, and that Doc Brown is the Lucifer character, and they're defeating time. In fact, what I find interesting is when Doc Brown first gets the idea to defeat time, he's fighting a clock in his bathroom. He literally fights a clock in his bathroom, hits his head, and then comes up with the idea of the flux capacitor to then defeat time and death because he doesn't have to age. He literally goes into the future in the second one and like de-ages himself. Like he's found out you can do this.
Yeah,
right?
and capacitors are actually vital in clocks and timers, and there's clocks all throughout the movie.
The opening scene is like 1,000 different clocks.
Yeah, I mean, literally the whole movie is clocks. Yeah, you can't unsee it once you see it. It's like Jesus Christ, it's clocks everywhere. Again, the clock tower. Everything is different. There's different types of clocks. Mm-hmm. So what again is that a message of like they're trying to tell us about time, in that time is relative or something like that, or like you said, maybe we're living in some kind of a prison or planet or something like that. I don't know, man. Maybe there's some kind of
and to bring that back too, right? Like the idea is if you've got Prometheus and Lucifer, the person who's a stand-in for us is actually a small little character, and says Joey. It's the little jailbird Joey, because we find out that he doesn't, he doesn't actually really want to leave prison. And when you go back to seeing him as a kid, he wants to be in his crib. He likes the bars. He wants to stay there, and he's comfortable in this prison planet, right? He's comfortable behind the bars, and it's kind of like Plato's allegory of the cave going on, that humans don't want to be free. So the way that I read this, if I was looking at it from a Gnostic aspect, is you've got, this idea that Marty's trying to escape, that he's the Prometheus, and that the rest of us, the people who don't want to, become enlightened and reach that 33rd degree or whatever other symbolism they're putting in this movie, we're all represented by Joey the jailbird, who's happy living in his cage with the bars. So,
well, we are hue man, right? We're HUE man. We're color. We're colors of the rainbow, of the light. That's what light is. When a light goes through a prism or a prison, it refracts into the colors of the rainbow. So we are literally colors of the rainbow, just in human form. So again, that's that whole aspect of like what I was talking about with maybe the prism of light that it refracts through is this prison that we've always been calling, for our whole lives we've been calling it prism, and it's actually the word prison. And maybe there are people who know about this that are telling us that we are in a prison planet, and they're like, again, just kind of laughing at us and putting us in our, making fun of us and, different things like that. It's funny when people do DMT trips and stuff like that, they go to this, other realm, this other universe, and they encounter beings, and the beings always ask things like, where am I? What am I? What is this? And they go, oh, it's all a show. Like they always say the same thing. It's a theater in some way, and it's a show for you, or whatever the case is. So they'll, like, some people have said they see movie sets, like the DMT realm, they'll reveal movie sets to them and stuff like that. So it's interesting. And like again, if you look at the Steven Spielberg who produced this movie, if you look at his tie into all of this, it's like he has a history of having very unique knowledge of futuristic things, and also like alien encounters, and like a depth of knowledge that people don't normally have. Like, we talked about it a little bit on my show. Like, you can't go through your whole first, 60 years in Hollywood and just hit home runs. Led Zeppelin doesn't continue to write hit songs today. Their hit songs came from the 70s, right? Or the 80s.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, even at the end of his time, sort of got, didn't have that star power anymore. So how was it that Steven Spielberg continued to make hit movie Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind and, Jurassic Park and all these Back to the Future? I mean, you think about it, he's had his hand in every single major movies, including the Goonies, which, by the way, came
out the same year as this.
Yeah. But it also ties into, because October 26, 1985 was the day that they were in, like when Marty had the clock encounter, and he, where you just saw the scene where he was the word sex. That was October 26, 1985. The Goonies, the kids are all hanging out, and they come across a newspaper, and it was 2 days old. And the newspaper said October 25th, 1985, October 24th, 1985. And it was 2 days old. And it was, so the day that the Goonies were actually exploring and having this adventure was October 26, 1985. So these things were happening simultaneously. So again, you can't say that these they don't know what's going on. They're not tying in these little Easter eggs and stuff throughout their little cinematic universe. So, but having that much knowledge of the future and having access to guys like J. Allen Hynek and things like that, like, clearly he learned something along the way, which is pretty interesting.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that Steven Spielberg, I almost said Stephen King. I think Steven Spielberg has made a Faustian bargain. I mean, this is why he's including the fallen angel numbers and all that stuff in that. In that, I don't know how much you are into numerology, because I looked into that for this one as well. I mean, there's only two numbers that really came up for me. It was like 88. 88 miles per hour is what they constantly are saying. I tried to figure out if that meant anything. Some numerology sites say it's like the number of power, abundance, wealth, good fortune, things like that. That it also represents infinity, and it represents as above, so below. So there's like that concept. One of the more interesting theories is that it represents HH, like Heil Hitler. Have you seen that, where like the Anti-Defamation League now says 88 is a racist number because it stands for, that's what the Anti-Defamation League says, because it stands for Heil Hitler. And the only reason I bring this up at all is because there is this theory that Doc Brown because he says in the second or third movie that his family was the Von Brauns, like Von Braun, like Werner Von Braun, and they came over here and they changed their last name to Braun. That he was also a scientist from Germany, essentially, who had worked on the Manhattan Project. And there's this whole theory that like that's the secret history of Doc Von Braun, right? Again, also Doc Von Braun, that relates to NASA and aliens and sex magic and things like that. If you know about JPL and all of that stuff, L. Ron Hubbard, again, JPL and L. Ron Hubbard in the desert, connected to NASA and all that stuff. And Von Braun, they were friends with Von Braun. So there's some connections there. But the only thing that like really adds to this, and you can't see it in this image super well, but this bumper sticker on the back of his truck that he's carrying the DeLorean in says, "One nuclear bomb can ruin your whole day." So there's like maybe a tie-in that he did work on the Manhattan Project, and that's his secret past. It's not super clear, but I just thought it was interesting. Again, maybe like a Operation Paperclip tie-in. And the other number that comes up,
he looks like Einstein, so it's not a surprise. I mean, you know, wild white hair, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they were trying to make him look like Einstein for sure.
Yeah.
And the other number that's weird, and I never remembered seeing this as a kid, is when the DeLorean spins out in the second movie, when it gets struck by lightning, it leaves this like backwards 99 in the sky.
Yeah,
and
that's interesting.
Again, if you're going by like numerology websites and stuff like that, it says it indicates a major life decision or a change that will shape your future. So like there's some tie in there possibly. The official explanation is that when the car got struck by lightning, it started to spin, and that the spin made it reach 88 miles per hour, which is why it traveled through time. I don't know, man. It's just a weird numerology thing. But
yeah, well, I mean, again, so somebody had knowledge of something, because the FCC went to Congress in February of 2001, and they said, "Hey, we need access. We need to control the 33 gigahertz signal, which is the broadcast signal that is the Earth to space communication signal." And they were actually like trying to they basically were justifying it, saying the DoD needs access. It's classified. We can't talk about it. A big event's going to happen, so we need to have access to this channel. Like what other big event happened in 2001? Again, 9/11, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so like that's a real thing. And people like, how, first of all, if you're going to Congress to get approval or something, how do you possibly know anything about the next day, the next minute, the next whatever? Like, unless they got some intel about something major was going to happen. But if they had intel about it, then why didn't they prevent it? Right. I mean, so why let it happen? And so that's the whole interesting tie into it, man. Is for me, again, it's 33 everywhere, 33 gigahertz signal. Why is that the specific communication signal from Earth to space? And what does space mean? Does space mean Mars and all this other stuff they're feeding us on TV? Or does it mean like the internal, or the space around us that we can't see, that imperceptible field of consciousness or whatever it is that we can't see? Like when they're looking at into a telescope, like the one of these big telescopes or whatever, like the Lucifer telescope, right? So that people don't even understand that that's a real thing that the Vatican came up with, is the Lucifer telescope, and it's looking into space. Well, so if we are living in the perfect harmony of electrical, energy, frequency, vibrations, we're in the perfect light of God, we're humans, then that means that everything else around us is very hot and very cold. So if it's too slow, then it's super cold. Something is super cold, and that's not perceptible to our we can't perceive it. We don't know it exists, because this is the only world we know that exists. So there is this dark, shadowy world of energy and frequency that's super slow, and it's super cold. So hell could actually be very cold. And there's a guy named Ed Mabry who talks a lot about this, hell being colder than heaven, or something along those lines. So, and then if you look at it on the other side, so again, that's the radio waves, right? And remember what I just said about them controlling the Earth to space communications? Well, radio waves are super slow. And so they're very cold. So when you're looking at it through a telescope, what do? It's a reverse prism. It's a reverse prism that they have to cryogenically cool down in order to see through. So they have to freeze it. They got to lower the frequency of it just to be able to see into the space around us. So again, man, it goes deep with this stuff. And it's like, it seems like when people talk about space and all this other stuff, they're not talking about space as we know it, the joke space. They're talking about the space that's imperceptible, that's around us every day. So my little 2 cents on that.
No, it's good, man. So you brought up some other like old Earth stuff that shows up in this movies that I totally didn't catch. I did catch the references to Jules Verne and stuff like that. But here's one that I never would have seen that you showed me, and that is that this is the first movie, right? This is the beginning.
The beginning. This is
the beginning with all the clocks.
Scene. Yeah.
And right here, I never would have noticed this. There's a flat Earth clock. Like it's kind of blurry, but you can totally tell that's what it is, which is super strange.
And that's the UN logo as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
All right. So it's like, again, somebody knows something, and there's some knowledge about like, again, what did Spielberg kind of know? Was he given information about more land and stuff like that? Again, I don't think everything was just happenstance. They just got a bunch of clocks and put them in. I think some of this stuff is very subliminal and intentional. And if you look at, there's a theory of old world Tartaria, the mud flood. Everybody is kind of familiar with that at this point, I think. What is the clock tower? It's an old, it's an older looking building, with columns and things like that. And it has a spire on the top, right? That, can charge it, electricity can charge it. And that's what a lot of these old world buildings have, is these spires on the top. Like they were used to function as part of the energy grid, right? Which was what I was talking about earlier. And then there was something that happened, and there's a lady named Michelle Gibson who talks a lot about this. There was something that happened that caused the cataclysm. And again, Bruce Cathy talks about this, that caused the cataclysm and caused these major devastations and changes in the world. Like something bad happened immediately, and a big flood happened. So this is a story that we know as Christians, right? The story of Noah and the flood. Well, there's this theory that there's more land as well. Like there's theories that giants once roamed the earth, which is what we know as the Nephilim, right? And God washed away the Nephilim with the flood, that kind of stuff. So if you look at like, there's a scene. Well, first of all, again, if you go back to Steven Spielberg's, one of his second biggest hit was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was about the Devil's Tower, and the Devil's Tower looks like a giant petrified tree stump, right? It's a giant tree stump that is like, that's Monument Valley.
Oh, okay. I was just bringing up some.
Yeah.
There we go. Is it this one?
So that's not Devil's Tower.
Okay,
that's actually Monument Valley. And so this particular Monument Valley is in Back to the Future 3. When they go back in time, they are driving through this. There's a cinema screen with, Native Americans, Indians running at them with arrows and stuff like that, and spears. But in that scene, they're actually in the Monument Valley, and they're in these monuments actually look like old petrified tree stumps as well. But if you pull up Devil's Tower, I don't know if you can get to that.
I can pull it. Yeah.
Try to pull up Devil's Tower. Devil's Tower is what was featured in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And remember, he had J. Allen Hynek working as his advisor on this movie. And J. Allen Hynek was even in the movie. Mm-hmm. So that people know that as like, first of all, it's a supernatural, it's a paranormal superhighway, but it also looks like a giant tree. So there's this theory that the world was huge, giants roamed the earth, that kind of stuff. And it seems like, Steven Spielberg knows something. Because if you look at Back to the Future 3, and I know we were talking mostly about Back to the Future 1, but if you look at Back to the Future 3, do you have that scene that I sent you?
I do, yeah. This is very interesting right here.
Not this one. So yeah, if you look at that, again, this is Back to the Future 3, and it's a giant tree stump in his miniature model of how they're going to get back to the future. This is his miniature model, and it has a giant tree stump. So again, what did he know? What does he know? And if you talk about giants, Steven Spielberg also made a movie called Big Friendly Giant, which is a movie about giants who live beyond in another land far away. And at night, they come in and they eat humans. They're called flesh lump eaters or something. I don't know how to say the word, but flesh lump eaters or whatever. And they come in and eat humans, but all of them eat humans except for this big friendly giant. So again, there's a tie-in. There's always a tie-in, and by the way, there's tons of stories about giants, David and Goliath, Jack and the Beanstalk. Right? That was, what did the giant say? Fee fi fo fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'm going to use his bones to make my bread, or something like that. Something right? Like so he's talking about. Yeah, he's talking about eating humans. For sure. And so like there was these, and again, that's why God flooded the earth, was because these Nephilim were eating humans, So like there's, again, how is it that it should, this kind of knowledge, this kind of esoteric knowledge, unless you study it, you don't know about it. So right. He's either he either studies this kind of stuff, or he knows something that like a lot of us don't know. And if there's constant undertones of like, aliens encounters and different things like that. I mean, even the Jackie Gleason scene where, Marty looks at the screen and he says, "Oh, I know this scene. This is where Ralph dresses up like an alien and pretends to be an alien invasion." So again, there's all these references to alien invasions and all that stuff. So, and again, you can see that in his future movies. Artificial intelligence is kind of it's an artificial intelligence invasion, but War of the Worlds, you got all these cowboys and aliens, you got all these different movies that are very futuristic. And it seems like a stretch to say that he's batting 1,000 his whole entire career with everything he's done, man. So I look at it from that angle, man. There's definitely some kind of old world undertones or something to it. Now, the ice wall tie-in to the flat earth is that. Like, there's this presumption that there's more land and that there are giants that still live there, and that they come in at night and they feast on humans. And I think that there's a Faustian bargain our government has with these things to just let them do what they have to do instead. And so like the whole population doesn't die, but they make these sacrifices to these things just to keep them at bay. And I think, in my opinion, that's why time changes. That's why they have more nighttime and stuff like that, so they can let these things come in and feast more. During the time changes that we had, the daylight savings time.
What daylight savings from when we're recording this is like 2 days away from here.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think we have a lot of differences of opinion on things like flat Earth, and I've got certain things that I'm not like fully on board with all the Tartaria stuff, but I do think that there's definitely some interesting stuff when it comes to like the old buildings, cymatics, things like that, energy grids. So we probably have some differences of opinion there, but you're definitely noticing stuff that I didn't. The Devil's Tower one is so interesting. The petrified tree stuff, I'm not like fully bought in, but it definitely, like, I think it's a definite possibility that these things are giant petrified tree stumps. There's no reason for me not to think that because I believe in the Genesis 6 Nephilim stuff, and that's why God flooded the earth. So there's not a reason for me not to think that there was giant fauna. We know there was giant fauna. We know there was giant. Right. If we look, that's what's so crazy about giantism is you'll be told like, oh, it's impossible. Yet we'll find fossils of things that we see today, like normal things that we see today that were giant back then. Yet we can't think that humans also used to be giant, or there were giants back then and stuff like that. Giant fauna is another one. We can find petrified remains of giant fauna. So the giant tree stuff is super interesting. And as he says in Close Encounters of a Third Kind, when he's making that mashed potato thing out of Devil's Tower, like the one thing that he's trying to tell the audience is, this is important. This means something. So for it to come up again in Back to the Future 3, it does feel like he's trying to tell you the same thing. He's trying to make sure that you get that this is important, that this means something. So that repeated things that Steven Spielberg has put in his movies, whether it's, maybe the Nephilim are nice with the big friendly giant, or, maybe we can have good interactions with the, aliens and humans and stuff like that. Definitely fascinating. I want to think if there's anything else I want to cover, because I know you got to get going soon. I know you got to pick up your son from school or whatever, but...
Yeah, well, J. Allen Hynek, by the way, his son went on to become a very well-known cinematographer, or like special effects. He won an Oscar for his creation of the Predator cloaking.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So again, when people see like Bigfoot and all this other stuff, they say the same thing. There's this almost like this cloaking thing that was over it that they could see it, but it was like a blurry, I think that's where the name Blurry Creatures came from, right? With the name of the Blurry Creatures podcast was that.
I think the joke is that it's always a blurry photo of these things. So maybe they just are blurry. Yeah.
Well, again, they can control the electronic world because they live in that world. they control the radio waves and the electronic waves where they process. So when we talk, it goes into the unseen world and comes back into our world. That's why we can't see like radio waves flying all around us.
To add to your plasma theory about cryptids, by the way, have you noticed that Bigfoot is often seen with ball lightning, and ball lightning is like a plasma phenomena?
Plasma ball. Yeah. Yep, of course.
I have one final theory in this this trilogy that I got to bring up because people will be mad if I don't, and that is that Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale predicted the future with Donald Trump in Back to the Future too. So the idea is, Biff is this casino owner with this, blonde, bad toupee, gold everywhere, all of this stuff. And he, starts off influencing politics and things like that. So the idea that people say is, did they predict Trump? And I just want to kind of get your thoughts on that. Like, do you think that Biff represents Trump?
It is pretty dang close, dude.
Pretty spot on, right?
Yeah. If you look at all the other stuff they got right too, though. I mean, Biff gets out of the cab and he pays the cab with a card on like almost like an Uber, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so there's things like that. There's like,
he pays with a thumbprint or something like that, which not everybody can do, but you can people do chip themselves and like scan their hands over things nowadays. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's like, get into the house, you need scan your fingerprints and stuff like that. Like they did with Jennifer. Just all those little things that like they had, all the kids were being very disrespectful at the table, and they had these like glasses on where they were like looking in, looking around and like
instead of eating dinner with their family.
Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on in the future. Like Biff's in a hot tub one time, and he's with a bunch of girls, and he's like changing, like there's like 5 different or 10 different screens, and he's just changing from one screen to another. I mean, you got to think about how futuristic some of that stuff really is in 1985. I mean, 1987. Whenever
as much as they got wrong about what 2015 would look like, they got a lot of it right. They got a lot of the attitude right? Exactly. Yeah. The whole idea of, the family is watching a bunch, like everybody's so distracted, right? We're watching like 17 screens at one time because we can't just settle down. We're looking at our phones at dinner. We're not having time with the family. Like, he definitely got the feel of it right. Even if he didn't get the FaceTime, he got FaceTime. Yeah,
he FaceTime with Flea, what I mean, from Red Hot Chili Peppers. So like there's a lot of weird little things about the future that they got right. I mean, even predicting it wasn't exact, but this was before Miami Marlins even become a baseball team. They predicted that the Cubs would beat Miami,
would beat them, in
the championship, which was in 2016. I think the Cubs won the World Series.
It happened a year after the prediction, but it was the idea of the Cubs winning the World Series ever was like a crazy prediction, right? Let alone that it would be against
a team that didn't even exist.
A team that didn't exist yet. That is a crazy.
Didn't come along till like 1998 or whatever it was. So.
Yeah, I want to show you this article really quick. This is from the Medium. It says, Back to the Future's antagonist Biff Tannen becomes a wealthy businessman, owns hotels, and marries beautiful women. Are these similarities with the president just mere coincidence or a statement on success in America? The director of Back to the Future movies, Bob Gale, he's not the director, he's the writer, gives his own insight of his character. He said in a 2015 interview that Biff was based on a famous celebrity / politician, and it can be reasonably inferred that celebrity is Donald Trump. He's actually since literally came out and said, yeah, we were thinking about Donald Trump at the time. Like him and Robert Zemeckis both said, we never would have thought that Trump would be president, but we definitely based Biff on Trump. And obviously they're not Trump supporters or fans, so their representation of Trump is rather unflattering. But it definitely, I mean, if you watch it, you can't tell me that wasn't intentional. That he was definitely based on Trump, for sure.
It's pretty clear. Yeah, it's pretty clear.
They did get a lot right. It is weird. It does make you think, whether it's time travel or, fallen angel knowledge or, whatever occult practices, that they definitely had some insights. And because some of it's just so spot on that it's like, is it just that they're that good at like looking at trends, or is there something a little bit more esoteric happening here?
I mean, pretty clearly it's esoteric to me, as looking at things from our lens, it's kind of like we are conditioned now a little bit to like be very skeptical about everything we see and to automatically look at the angles of conspiracy and all that stuff. But again, once you wake up to this stuff, it's like everything is a psyop. Everything is a somehow everybody knows these people who run Hollywood know these things. How are they making movies? Like there was a show with Josh Jackson that my mom, called Fringe, that my mom told me about.
I love Fringe. Big fan of that show.
I haven't watched it, but she said it was just like it hits on like every single like modern day thing that's happened. Has predicted a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of movies like that.
Watch everything but the last season. Don't even attempt to watch the last season. Don't even start it. But I highly recommend Fringe. I think you'll like it. So
yeah, I'll check it out, man. I mean, again, she's my mom is the best when it comes to movies. She could sit here and just rattle off this stuff all day with you, dude.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Brad, I just want to thank you for coming on Real Conspiracies. This was very fun. We'll have to do this again at some point. Let people know where they can find your work.
Yeah, I have a show called The Awakened Podcast. You can find me online at theawakenedpodcast.com. I created my own little link tree. So if you just want to be quick about where you can get the links directly from theawakenedpodcast.com, or you can go to theawakenedpodcast.com/links, and you have it's like my own little link tree. So I have a great following on Spotify. For whatever reason, Apple doesn't do so well. So if you guys if you have iPhones, please go follow me on the Apple Podcast and try to help me catch up with the Spotify podcast numbers. But follow me on Spotify, follow me on Apple. I'm trying to build up a little bit of a Rumble and YouTube presence. I got kind of different ideas of how I want to do that. It might not be specific show related stuff, but you can find me on there. And I think I'm going to start doing more videos about like energy grid stuff. I'm going to travel around to different places and show these stone structures that a lot of people don't know about. This stuff right here in South Carolina, stuff in Georgia, stuff in Alabama, all these pyramids all over the United States. I'm going to start doing more of that where I show people rather than just talk about it, So
I like it, dude.
Thank you for having me on, bro. I appreciate this. I love this kind of stuff, man. I can do this every day.
Yeah, man. I do too. And I love the idea of the American pyramid stuff. So we should talk about that sometime because I got a story to tell you off air. Sure. But yes, go follow the Awakened Podcast, especially if you're on Apple iTunes. Give it a 5-star review anywhere you can. I also have a link in the description to easily give a 5-star review to Real Conspiracies. It helps grow the show. So thank you guys for that. Thank you, Brad, for coming on. And until next time, everyone, keep it real.